Kulthum. Kulthum Arabic, Kalthum Egyptian Arabic, kælʻsuːm, English, Kalthoum, born Fāṭima Ibrahim es-Sayyid el-Beltāģī, ftm @ʻIbrāhīm el-Sid el-Beltāǧī 31 December 1898 3 February 1975. She was given the honorific title Kawkab, al-Sharq Kwkb el-Sharq, Star of the Easts of the Easts. She is considered a national icon in her native Egypt. She has been dubbed the Voice of Egypt, the Lady of Arabic Song, and Egypt's Fourth Pyramid. Biography. Early life. Kulthum was born in the village of Tame-e-Zahara, belonging to the city of Senbeloin, Dakalia Governorate, in the Nile Delta, to a family with a religious background, as her father Ibrahim el-Sayyid el-Beltāģī was an imam from the Egyptian countryside. Her mother was Fāṭima el-Maliki, a housewife. She learned how to sing by listening to her father teach her older brother, Khalid. From a young age, she showed exceptional singing talent. Through her father, she learned to recite the Quran, and she reportedly memorized the entire book. Her grandfather was also a well-known reader of the Quran, and she remembered how the villagers used to listen to him when he recited the Quran. When she was 12 years old, having noticed her strength in singing, her father asked her to join the family ensemble, upon which she joined as a supporting voice, at the beginning just repeating what the others sung. On stage, she wore a boy's cloak and Bedouin head covering in order to alleviate her father's anxiety about her reputation and public performance. At the age of 16, she was noticed by Mohammed Abou Ella, a modestly famous singer, who taught her the old classical Arabic repertoire. A few years later, she met the famous composer and oudist Zakaria Ahmad, who invited her to Cairo. Although she made several visits to Cairo in the early 1920s, she waited until 1923 before permanently moving there. She was invited on several occasions to the home of Amin Bey al-Mahdi, who taught her to play the oud, a type of lute. She developed a close relationship with Rohaya al-Mahdi, Amin's daughter, and became her closest friend. Kulthum even attended Rohaya's daughter's wedding, although she ordinarily preferred not to appear in public offstage. During her early career years, she faced staunch competition from two prominent singers, Mounira el-Mahdi and Fathia Ahmad, who had similar voices. El-Mahdi's friend, who worked as an editor at Al-Masra several times, suggested that Kulthum must have married one of the guests who frequently visited her household, to the extent that her father decided to return to the village they came from together with his family. Her father would only change his mind upon the persuasive arguments of Amin al-Mahdi. Following, Kulthum made a public statement regarding visits in her household, which she announced she would not receive. In 1923, she struck a contract with Odeon Records, which by 1926 would pay her more than any other Egyptian musical artist per record. Professional career. Amin el-Mahdi welcomed her into the cultural circles in Cairo. In 1924, she was introduced to the poet Ahmed Rami, who was to write 137 songs for her, and also introduced her to French literature, eventually becoming her head mentor in Arabic literature and literary analysis. In 1926, she left Odeon Records for Gramophone Records, who would pay her about the double per record and even gave her an additional annual income of $10,000. She also maintained a tightly managed public image, which undoubtedly added to her allure. Furthermore, she was introduced to the renowned oud virtuoso and composer Mohammed el-Kassaghī, who introduced her to the Arabic Theatre Palace, where she would experience her first real public success. Other musicians who influenced her musical performances at the time were Dawud Hosni or Abu al-Ila Mohammed. Al-Ila Mohammed instructed her in the control over her voice and variants of the Arabic miwasha. By 1930, she was so well known to the public that she was the example to follow for several young female singers. In 1932, she embarked upon a major tour of the Middle East and North Africa, performing in prominent Arab capital cities such as Damascus, Baghdad, Beirut, Rabat, Tunis, and finally Tripoli. In 1934, Kulthum sang for the inaugural broadcast of Radio Cairo, the state station. From then on onwards, she performed at a concert on every first Thursday of a month for 40 years. Her influence kept growing and expanding beyond the artistic scene. The reigning royal family would request private concerts and even attend her public performances. In 1944, King Farouk I of Egypt decorated her with the highest level of orders Nishan el-Kamel, a decoration reserved exclusively to members of the royal family and politicians. Despite this recognition, the royal family rigidly opposed her potential marriage to the king's uncle, a rejection that deeply wounded her pride and led her to distance herself from the royal family and embrace grassroots causes, such as her answering the request of the Egyptian Legion trapped in the Fallujah pocket during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War to sing. Among the army men trapped were the figures who were going to lead the bloodless revolution of 23 July 1952, prominently Gamal Abdel Nasser. Following the revolution, the Egyptian Musicians Guild, of which she became a member and eventually president, rejected her because she had sung for the then-deposed King Farouk of Egypt. When Nasser discovered that her songs were banned from being aired on the radio, he reportedly said something to the effect of, "What are they, crazy? Do you want Egypt to turn against us?" Later, Nasser would schedule his speeches so they would not interfere with the radio performances of Kulthum. Some claim that Kulthum's popularity helped Nasser's political agenda. For example, Nasser's speeches and other government messages were frequently broadcast immediately after Kulthum's monthly radio concerts. She sang many songs in support of Nasser, with whom she developed a close friendship. One of her songs associated with Nasser, Wallahi Zaman, Ya Salahi, It's Been a Long Time, O Weapon of Mine, was adopted as the Egyptian national anthem from 1960 to 1979, when President Sadat revoked it because of the peace negotiations with Israel and replaced it by the less militant By Lady, By Lady, By Lady, which continues to be Egypt. Kulthum was also known for her continuous contributions to works supporting the Egyptian military efforts. Until 1972, for about half a century, she gave at least one monthly concert. Kulthum's monthly concerts were renowned for their ability to clear the streets of some of the world's most populous cities as people rushed home to tune in. Her songs deal mostly with the universal themes of love, longing, and loss. A typical Kulthum concert consisted of the performance of 2 or 3 songs over a period of 3 to 4 hours. These performances are in some ways reminiscent of the structure of Western opera, consisting of long vocal passages linked by shorter orchestral interludes. However, Kulthum was not stylistically influenced by opera, and she sang solo most of her career. During the 1930s, her repertoire took the first of several specific stylistic directions. Her songs were virtuosic, as befitted her newly trained and very capable voice, and romantic and modern in musical style, feeding the prevailing currents in Egyptian popular culture of the time. She worked extensively with texts by Romance poet Ahmad Rami and composer Mohammed el-Kasabgi, whose songs incorporated European instruments such as the violoncello and double bass, as well as harmony. In 1936, she made her debut as an actress in the movie Wedded by Fritz Kramp. During her career, she would act in 5 more movies, of which 4 would be directed by Ahmad Badrakhan, while Salama and Fāṭima would be the most acclaimed. Golden Age. Kulthum's musical directions in the 1940s and early 1950s and her mature performing style led this period to becoming popularly known as the Golden Age of Kulthum. In keeping with changing popular taste, as well as her own artistic inclinations, in the early 1940s, she requested songs from composer Zakaria Ahmad and colloquial poet Mahmoud Bayram el-Tunsi cast in styles considered to be indigenously Egyptian. This represented a dramatic departure from the modernist romantic songs of the 1930s, mainly led by Mohammed el-Kasabgi. Kulthum had abstained from singing Kasabgi's music since the early 1940s. Their last stage song collaboration in 1941 was Rak El Habib, The Lover's Heart Softens, one of her most popular, intricate, and high-caliber songs. The reason for the separation is not clear. It is speculated that this was due in part to the popular failure of the movie Ada, in which Kulthum sings mostly Cassidy's compositions, including the first part of the opera. Cassidy was experimenting with Arabic music, under the influence of classical European music, and was composing a lot for Ismahan, a singer who immigrated to Egypt from Syria and was the only serious competitor for Kulthum before Ismahan's death in a car accident in 1944. Simultaneously, Kulthum started to rely heavily on a younger composer who joined her artistic team a few years earlier, Raed al-Sanbati. While Sanbati was evidently influenced by Cassidy in those early years, the melodic lines he composed were more lyrical and more acceptable to Kulthum's audience. The result of collaborations with Rami/Sanbati and al-Tunisi/Ahmad was a populist and popular repertoire that had lasting appeal for the Egyptian audience. In 1946, Kulthum defied all odds by presenting a religious poem in classical Arabic. Salhu Kalbi Ask My Heart was written by Ahmed Shawki and composed by Raed al-Sanbati. The success was immediate and it reconnected Kulthum with her early singing years. Similar poems written by Shawki were subsequently composed by Sanbati and sung by Kulthum, including Wulid el-Hawda, The Prophet is Born 1949, in which she surprised royalists by singing a verse that describes the Prophet Mohammed. At the peak of her career, in 1950, Kulthum sang Sanbati's composition of excerpts of what Ahmad Rami considered the accomplishment of his career, the translation from Persian into classical Arabic of Omar Khayyam's quatrains Rubaiyat el-Khayyam. The song included quatrains that deal with both Epicureanism and redemption. Ibrahim Nagi's poem Al-Atla, The Ruins, was sung by Kalthoum in a personal version and in a melody composed by Sanbati and premiered in 1966, is considered a signature song of hers. As Kulthum's vocal abilities had regressed considerably by then, the song can be viewed as the last example of genuine Arabic music at a time when even Kulthum had started to compromise by singing Western-influenced pieces composed by her old rival Mohammed Abdul Wahab. The duration of Kulthum's songs in performance was not fixed as upon the audience request for more repetitions. She would repeat the lines requested at length, and her performances usually lasted for up to 5 hours, during which 3 songs were sung. For example, the available live performances, about 30 of Yazelni, one of her most popular songs, varied in length from 45 to 90 minutes, depending on both her creative mood for improvisations, illustrating the dynamic relationship between the singer and the audience as they fed off each other's emotional energy. An improvisatory technique, which was typical of old classical Arabic singing, and which she executed for as long as she could have both her regressing vocal abilities with age and the increased westernization of Arabic music, became an impediment to this art, was to repeat a single line or stanza over and over, subtly altering the emotive emphasis and intensity. Her concerts used to broadcast from Thursday 9:30 p.m. until the early morning hours on Friday. The spontaneous creativity of Kulthum as a singer is most impressive when, upon listening to these many different renditions of the same song over a time span of 5 years, 1954-1959, the listener is offered a totally unique and different experience. This intense, highly personalized relationship was undoubtedly one of the reasons for Kulthum's tremendous success as an artist. Worth noting, though, that the length of a performance did not necessarily reflect either its quality or the improvisatory creativity of Kulthum. Around 1965, Kulthum started collaborating with composer Mohammed Abdul Wahab. Her first song composed by Abdul Wahab, Enta Amri, You Are My Life. According to Andrei Chawarqui, in May 1967, just before the Six-Day War, she was heard on Radio Cairo and Radio Damas singing Slaughter, 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 and Have No Pity. Another source mentions the creation of a song of war. Laura Lohman has identified several other war songs created for her in that same period. In 1969 it was followed by another, Asbaha al-Ana Indi Bundukiya, I Now Have a Rifle. Her songs took on more a soul-searching quality in 1967 following the defeat of Egypt during the Six-Day War. Hadith el-Raw Sermon of the Soul, which is a translation from the poet Mohammed Iqbal's Shikwa, set up a very reflective tone. Generals in the audience are said to have been left in tears. Following the formation of the United Arab Emirates (UAE) in 1971, she staged several concerts upon invitation of its first president Zayd bin Sultan Al Nahyan to celebrate the event. Kulthum also sang for composers Mohammed El-Maudi, Said McCoy, and Balik Hamdi. Death and funeral. Kulthum died on 3 February 1975 from kidney failure. Her funeral procession became a national event, with around 4 million Egyptians lining the streets to catch a glimpse as her cortege passed. Her funeral's attendance drew a greater audience than the one of the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser. In the area where the funeral procession took place, traffic was cut off 2 hours ahead of the procession. The mourners would also wrest the casket from the shoulders of its bearers, forced the procession to change its direction, and brought her coffin to the prominent Al-Azhar Mosque. She was buried in a mausoleum close to the mausoleum of Imam al-Shafi in the City of the Dead in Cairo. Artistic legacy. Kulthum is regarded as one of the greatest singers in the history of Arab music, with significant influence on a number of musicians, both in the Arab world and beyond. Jah Wobble has cited her as a significant influence on his work, and Bob Dylan has been quoted praising her as well. Maria Callas, Marie Lafort, Bono, and Robert Plant, among many other artists, are also known admirers of Kulthum's music. Yasu Ender, a fan of hers since childhood, recorded his 2004 album Egypt with an Egyptian orchestra in homage to her legacy. One of her best-known songs, Ente Amri, has been covered and reinterpreted numerous times. Alf Layla Wa Layla was translated into jazz on French-Lebanese trumpeter Ibrahim Malouf's 2015 album Kælʻsuːm. She was referred to as the Lady by Charles de Gaulle and is regarded as the incomparable voice by Maria Callas. It is difficult to accurately measure her vocal range at its peak, as most of her songs were recorded live. Even today, she has retained a near-mythical status among young Egyptians. In 2001, the Egyptian government opened the Kawkab al-Sharq Star of the East Museum in the singer's memory. Housed in a pavilion on the grounds of Cairo's Mainsterly Palace, the collection includes a range of Kulthum's personal possessions, including her trademark sunglasses and scarves, along with photographs, recordings, and other archival material. Critics and journalists note that while she was known to have touched many different artists, she had also touched the lives of millions of her listeners and fans. Her performances combined raw emotion and political rhetoric. She was greatly influential and spoke about politics through her music. An example of this is seen in her music performed after World War II. The theme at the surface was love, yet a deeper interpretation of the lyrics, for example, in the song Salut Kalbi, reveals questioning of political motives in times of political tension. Kulthum's political rhetoric in her music is still influential today, not only in Egypt, but in many other Middle Eastern countries and even globally. Her entire catalog was acquired by Mazika Group in the early 2000s. Voice. Kulthum was a contralto. Contralto singers are uncommon and sing in the lowest register of the female voice. She was known to be able to improvise, and it is said that she wouldn't sing a line the same way twice. She was a student of Abu al-Ula Mohammed from soon after she arrived to Cairo to when he died in 1927. He taught her to adapt her voice to the meaning and the melody in a traditional Arabic aesthetic. Remembrance. She is referenced at length in the lyrics of the central ballad Omar Sharif in the musical The Band's Visit. A pearl necklace with 1888 pearls she received from Zayd bin Sultan Al Nahyan. is exhibited at the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. In memory of her, also 40 years after her death, Egyptian radio stations used to broadcast her music every first Thursday of a month. Her music. In January 2019, at the Winter in Tantora Festival in Al-Ula, for the first time they had a performed live concert, with her appearing as a hologram, with accompaniment by an orchestra and bedecked in flowing, full-length gowns as she had when debuting in the 1920s. Hologram concerts featuring her have been organized also by the Egyptian Minister of Culture in his Abdium in Cairo and the Dubai Opera. Notable songs. Filmography. Wedad 1936, Nashid al-Amal, The Chant of Hope 1937, Dananir 1940, Ida 1942, Salama 1945, Fāṭima 1947,